Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
Hey, BTB buddies. Happy New Year, and thank you for listening to Behind the Bits. First episode this year is a very good one. Steve Hofstetter is one of the hardest working comedians working today. He co-founded the Nowhere Comedy Club, which is the gold standard for virtual comedy shows, and has a new book out called Ginger Kid, Mostly True Stories from a Former Nerd. This was a great talk, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, the BTB Internet Talk Show is back on Thursday at 8 p.m. this week. You can stream it live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I might throw in Twitch into the mix as well. Why not? Thanks again for listening, and here comes Steve Hofstetter. It's a good one. Today, I've got with me the hardest working man in the comedy business, Steve Hofstetter. Steve Hofstetter, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Great. It's really great to have you on the show. You are somebody I've wanted to have on the show, and I'm glad I saw your post saying that you were going to do some podcasts. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
So I'm going to jump around a little bit here today because I want to make sure we put some important stuff up front. One of the things that I really admired that you did during this pandemic is you were the co-founder of the Nowhere Comedy Club. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you got it started?
Yeah. Nowhere is the first all-digital comedy venue. And the way we got it started is I'd been doing virtual reality shows for years. And Ben Glebe had been doing live streaming from comedy clubs. When it was clear that we would have to cancel a bunch of tour shows, which was, I think, March 12th, 11th or 12th, somewhere around there. At the same time, Chris Bowers, who, has been a buddy of mine, and we co-owned comedy clubs together, he reached out to me and said, hey, I want to do a variety show. And Ben reached out to me and said, hey, I want to start a comedy club. And I had already had plans to do more stuff on my, more live streams on my YouTube and potentially Facebook. And kind of got it all together and started the Social Distancing Social Club, which is this hybrid of, podcast, morning radio, and late night TV.
Right.
It's a little of everything, but it's also, a kind of a TIP-funded program where live stand-ups actually get paid to perform. And while we were doing that, Ben and I continued working on the comedy club idea. And, we ran into the problems we were kind of running into were, okay, what tech do we use, as well as how do we make sure the audience is a good audience? And, the thing that we did with SDSC right away was ensure that we could hear the audience. So many of the early Zoom shows, and including the ones that are going on, that are still going on, don't have an audience you can hear. And I don't understand why suddenly comedians became such cowards. Like, mic the audience the same way that you could hear them if you were at a club. They could yell out at a club or a theater or a bar or any other venue, and we're used to that. And it's easier to handle them on Zoom because you just mute them or kick them out.
Right.
So we made sure the audience was part of it, which I think is super important. And then we also, I have a philosophy of, to get the right answers, you have to ask yourself the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of comedians were asking the wrong question. They were asking, how do we reach as big of an audience online as possible? Because that was always the question you asked when you were doing social media.
Right.
But when we're trying to replicate live shows, the correct question is, how do you reach the right audience? How do you replicate 200 respectful people watching a show like we're used to at a comedy club?
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided we would limit the number of tickets we would sell, and we would charge for them. And we wouldn't just charge $1 or suggest donation. We would charge at least $10. And we tested it, and April 6th was our first show. It was actually 3 shows that day. I tried one at 11 a.m., one at 11 p.m., and one at 6 p.m. And the idea was that one was for Europe, one was for Australia, and one was for North America. Mm-hmm. And I got to tour the world in one day, and we've been doing shows ever since.
Yeah, I am very impressed. First off, I totally ripped off your social distancing talk show myself. I've got one called the BTB Internet Talk Show, and it's kind of a cross between yours and Ian Bagg's show. So just so you know, it's a total rip off because I liked what you did.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I mean, the reality is we're all in this business. We're all gonna try to create similar things, and I respect that you put it that way, but unless you're really doing the same format, then I don't think it would be a rip.
Yeah, it's the idea. The idea was so good, I took it and ran with it, and I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. But this Nowhere Comedy Club, I mean, this is not like. I mean, this is A-list people. I mean, you got the Birbigs all weekend, Mike Birbiglia. You got Todd Barry coming up. You've got Mary Santora. You got the Gays R Us show with a lot of great people. And, I mean, just great stuff. And then you're up there. Greg Proops is up there. I mean, it's really cool. I'm actually going to buy tickets for one of the Birbiglia shows, and I think I'm going to do a Q&A one so I can talk to him because I want him to be on the podcast. Maybe I can convince him.
Well, I mean, the Birbig shows are some of the best shows, if not the best shows we have.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've had John Cleese did one, and we're going to have him come back, and we've had some of the people who have popped in on the showcases or the interview shows. Bar Brothers are regulars, so we've had Jim Gaffigan and Nikki Glazer and John Hamm, and I mean, it's been insane. But the Birbig shows are produced so well. Like, he's not someone who threw a laptop up on a couple of empty Amazon boxes.
Yeah.
Like, he really put the thought in, put the effort in, bought the equipment, like, understood that this is a way to replicate a theater show. Mm-hmm. And so his shows there are perfection. He's so good at it, and his team is so good at it.
Yeah.
But the fun thing about it is that there's no limitation of geography, and so we've had a comic who was in Singapore. We've had a bunch of Australian comics. We have a UK comic, and to be able to have anyone who is qualified to do so do a show, no matter where they are in the world, is something really cool. I co-host a weekly show with Dan Muggleton, who does it from Australia. Mm-hmm. It's been kind of great.
So let's get into your work ethic a little bit, because I have never seen somebody. Well, Bob Zaney used to do it, but somebody who booked as many shows all around the country as you. What is it that drives you to do so many shows and be out there for so much of the year?
My running joke about it is fear of failure.
Uh-huh.
But really what it is when you work for yourself and you don't do the work, the only person you're stealing from is you. Mm. So I wouldn't want an employee to not put the work in. So why wouldn't I? Not to mention, why do we do this if we don't love it?
Right.
Like, I love being a stand-up comic. And while the road is exhausting, it's also fun and rewarding. And especially now where I'm at the point in my career where, the shows are usually packed, the money's good, the get to bring my own openers, so I'm touring with friends. Like, why would I want to do less of that? It sounds great.
Mm-hmm. When you're on the road and you're doing, let's pretend like we're not in COVID times and locked in.
Yeah.
If you're doing like 5 shows in a week and it's at 3 different venues, do you mix things up? Do you do different shows for different crowds? Do you work out new material? How does your show go when you're doing so many?
I certainly try to, work some new stuff into my set when I can, but, I keep things fresh by ending each show with a Q&A. And it's not only a Q&A with me, but I bring my openers on stage for it also.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a lot of fun. We have a great time, and that keeps every show different. But I am working on material special. And so if I want to work out that material, then I need to work on that material. And every now and then, something will happen in the news that'll call for me going back to an old bit, or I'll be in the mood to talk about something. But for the most part, I'm trying to get as close to that hour that I'm developing as possible in order to make it perfect, or as perfect as it'll be in order to record it.
Mm-hmm. When did the Q&A start? How long have you been doing that?
Oh, God, I've been doing that over a decade.
Okay.
And, I started doing it when I didn't really have fans. And so it was tough to get people to ask questions because people didn't come wanting to ask questions.
Uh-huh.
But it was an evolution of, I started ad-libbing on Sundays because people would come to like a Thursday show and they would say, "Oh, that was fun. I want to come back and see you." And I'm like, "Well, it's the same show all week. So, even if I do like 10 minutes different, it's still, it's not like I had hours and hours and hours of stuff I was doing a different show every day." So I got this idea because clubs would have a Sunday show. And the clubs that had a Sunday show, and this is when you're not drawing, you're just at the mercy of their own audience. And when clubs have a Sunday show, you basically do 2 packed shows on a Saturday, and then you end the week in front of 30 people. And that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So it started in Louisville at the Comedy Caravan. When I asked them for permission, I said, "Hey, can I give out free tickets throughout the week to Sunday? And, I'll tell people that it's 100% ad-lib. You'll come back, you'll see a different set." And they said yes. And it went so well that eventually my Louisville show, the Sunday, started selling out before the Saturday. Because it just became word of mouth. People were like, "Oh, this is the show where anything can happen." And it's the show where, like, hey, if you have a mouthy friend, bring them to the show. And what I used to say in the beginning was, when I would talk about the ad-lib show, I would say, "Come to the show. If you have questions, great. I'm going to ask you questions. And if you have a mouthy friend, bring them to the show. I'll fuck them up."
Mm-hmm.
And so it just became this thing that kind of took on a life of its own. And so I started, a lot of the clubs didn't have Sunday shows. And so I started just incorporating ad-lib into my regular show. And I did that by ending with a Q&A. And in the beginning, I would bribe them to ask questions. I would say, "Hey, I do my merch pitch where I talk about my album." And then I would say, the person who asks the best question gets a free album.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would still only get like a question or two. But it evolved into something that's, now part of my show. And by the way, the reason that, I really believe in it is because it personalizes the show for people who are there. And it allows someone to watch more than one show in a week. Even if I'm doing the same hour up front, they still see the back end is completely different.
Right.
And, it's also something that I know I can do as an artist that not everyone can do. So why not lean into my strength?
Right.
And, I recommend that for all comedians. If there's something you can do that differentiates you as a comedian, then do it.
It's very improv-y because you don't know what they're going to ask. And I've watched some, because you tape a lot of it, and I've watched quite a few of them, and you're pretty fast on your feet, but I don't see that you have an improv background. How is that just something that comes naturally to you?
So I kind of do have an improv background.
Okay.
But it was when I was a kid.
Okay.
So the thing that got me into comedy was when I was 13, I joined, my high school had an improv club, and I joined it, and I'd say high school, we actually started in 7th grade. So from 8th grade to 12th grade, I did improv at least once a week for 5 years.
Cool.
And so it is something that it's been a bit, I don't have any like real formal training. We were just kind of trying to figure things out by watching old episodes of the British Newsline. But at the same time, every now and then I have, I've joined with an improv group on stage for something fun. And it's a fun little throwback to when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's really cool. When did so obviously your YouTube channel is one of the biggest YouTube channels of like any comic, and a lot of it has to do with the responses to hecklers. And how did that all come about?
It started as a YouTube thing in the beginning of my YouTube channel, I didn't want to put my material up. I just wanted to put outtakes up. So I would put like clips up from those Sunday shows. And then there was a show where my opener was trying to get a new tape, and so he hired a videographer to shoot all weekend. We were in Comedy on Stage in Madison. And I was like, hey, if I throw him a couple of bucks, if I cover a little bit of the cost, can he shoot me as well? And, he said yes. And there was an incident where a guy asked something very stupid, and just in a very giggly way, I just kind of made fun of how dumb the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that clip and I put it up, not really thinking much of it. And it just started getting views. And I remember how excited I was when it hit 30,000 views. I remember where I was. That's how important it was. When it hit 30,000 views, and I remember thinking, wow, 30,000 people have seen my work. And now if a clip doesn't get 30,000 views, I'm like, ugh, what a failure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because your expectations shift. But it just started moving, and it was an accident that these became something big. But when they started moving, I definitely took note, leaned into it, and started trying to put more up. And I went from shooting a show occasionally with a videographer to buying a flip camera, one of those little things that you put in the back of the room. You look like a potato.
Yeah.
And then buying a $200 used piece of garbage, and then eventually having 3 cameras, and now having 4 4K cameras that I use to shoot every show. And it was just an evolution of investing in myself.
That's really cool. Has it become just a thing where people just come to your show to heckle? Because most of the people that heckle seem like just actual dumbasses. And is anybody
100% of them are actual dumbasses.
Yeah.
It has only happened one time. And when that happened, I kicked the guy out and I deleted the footage. Because no one is going to get infamy by interrupting someone else's night.
Right.
And what I actually did on that one, because, I'm petty, or I find being petty very funny, is when I kicked him out, as he was leaving, I said, I can't wait to put this clip up on YouTube. And after he left, I told that whole crowd there was no way I was putting that clip up on YouTube. I just wanted him to think I was going to, so he'd go home and reload for a year like a dick.
Yeah.
And then, just in case it didn't happen, I told that whole crowd, 400 people, I told them to go home after the show and and comment on every video. Can't wait to see the Portland clip. And they did that for months.
Uh-huh.
For months. It was the best. And every time I saw someone comment that, I laughed. It was the best.
So you're...
And to give you a more serious answer of why, people want to see it. No one wants to be it.
Yeah.
Plenty of people say to me after a show, oh, I wish someone heckled you. And plenty of people say, oh, it's too bad no one did.
Uh-huh.
But when you see someone, if you're watching a video on YouTube of a marksman and you see them shoot a dummy in the head, you don't watch that and say, who can shoot me in the head? You
Right.
might want to see him do it in person. You don't want to get shot. And I think that's the main logic of it.
Right. I think, you have a definite point of view, and your act, you definitely have opinions. So I guess, and from what I know about comedy and going to a lot of shows and doing shows, people don't research the comedian that they're going to see a lot of times. And they don't get what they expect, which they may expect you to be a prop comic or whatever. So when they come in and start drinking, I can see how between your point of view and material and them drinking, I can see how that is a good breeding ground for just people being dumbasses.
Oh yeah, the idea when people suggest that the heckler clips are fake. First of all, how? Explain the logistics. But even if, not getting into that ridiculousness, the idea that it's to find someone drunk who's an asshole, I mean, that's every bar you've ever gone to, there's that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, add in the fact that I record every show. I do 300 shows a year. I do an hour a night, and I go last when they're typically more wasted. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed watching a lot of those. Between that and the Q&A, I think that's a really cool way to differentiate yourself, and obviously it's done very well for you.
Thank you.
One of the things I want to get into is, I follow you on social media, and I've been watching pretty closely, the issues that have gone on this year. And for somebody who works as hard as you do and wants to keep your name out there, I was very impressed by the fact that you took a stand on Black Lives Matter, COVID, our president, and things like that, and risked all of that that you've worked for. And can you tell me, first of all, a lot of comics didn't. A lot of comics kept quiet, but you've been pretty vocal about it. Can you tell me what prompted you to do that and what you expected to happen versus what actually happened?
I have spent over a decade cultivating a compassionate fan base. I am very proud of my fans.
Mm-hmm.
Look, sometimes you get the person who just saw me yell at a heckler and goes, "Oh, he's mean, I like that," and doesn't understand the psychology behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, if you're vocal, the right people find you. And what I try to explain to, the comedy friends who have asked me about that is that it is good for business. The only way that you risk alienating your fan base is if your fan base sucks.
Mm-hmm.
If you have cultivated the right fan base, then you should have no problem speaking up. Whenever somebody says to me, "Oh, you're alienating half your audience," I go, no. They're not my audience. I'm alienating maybe 2% of my audience,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm reaching out to more of it.
Right.
Every time over the years that I've talked shit about an important subject, I will lose a couple hundred people and gain 1,000. And And the numbers shift over the years, but it's always a net gain. Because if you're saying something you truly believe in, you will resonate with the other people who believe in it. When you say, no one goes into a dress store and tells them they're losing half their audience by not selling pants. That's not what they do.
Right.
And so I have shown other comics, and I have posted my numbers on my own social media, that there was a comment, I got a DM the day that I posted. I donated a good deal of money to a Black Lives Matter COVID fund.
Mm.
And it was something started by Chris Red, and I thought it was a really amazing charity. And I posted it saying that, I would match what people were donating. And so that day, I got a really nasty message from someone saying, you're losing your fans, and I used to think you were funny, and blah, blah, blah. And I took that message and I screenshotted it along with my Instagram numbers for that week that showed I had gained over 10,000 followers in a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I posted it with my Facebook numbers, which showed I was gaining 2,000 to 4,000 a day. And I posted those, and I said, tell me again how this is making me lose followers.
Yeah. That I followed that, and that's why I brought up that question, because do you feel like it's becoming important? So one of my first interviews, I talked to a PhD in marketing, or I can't remember what his PhD is, but he studies comedy, and he talks about two different types of comedians. One is a thermometer comedian, and they tell you about what's going on. The other one is a thermostat comedian, and that's somebody who is trying to change minds by what they say. Do you feel like we need more thermostat comedians now?
That is such a great way to break it down. I've never heard that before. I love that.
Yeah.
I think we always needed thermostat comedians. Now, there are a lot of thermostat comedians, and look, there is a time and a place for a comedian that just wants to distract you and make you laugh and not think about your problems,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. That ain't me. I don't begrudge the people who do it. So it's hard for me to say definitively we need more thermostat comedians. I'm just proud to be one.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of people I've talked to who were more of a thermometer type comedian are saying that they want to be a thermostat comedian now, and they're writing material in that fashion just because they want to make a change. They want to change people's minds.
Yeah, why else did we get into this?
Yeah, no doubt. So let's talk about I can't say I've read Ginger Kid, but I know this is it's on my list to buy. I buy so many things from the people I talk to, but talking about being a nerd and being bullied in high school and junior high and stuff like that. First off, what were you like a nerd in the fact that you were into nerdy things? Or were you more of an outlier type nerd?
Both. I think more the first one.
Okay.
I was always like not too far removed from kids who were cool, but still not accepted.
Mm-hmm.
I was super into fantasy baseball, loved sci-fi, like the standard stuff.
Yeah.
And, I think I've always had more of an adult sense of humor that doesn't really fly with, 13, 14-year-olds.
Right.
A 13, 14-year-old doesn't appreciate a good pun. So, like that, I've been listening to Carlin since I was like 7.
Uh-huh.
So, I started listening as I got older, I learned how to relate to people better. But I think a lot of us feel that. I think not feeling like you fit in is a pretty universal thing.
Mm-hmm. Did you use comedy to try to fit in?
Eventually, yeah, and that's kind of the arc of Ginger Kid, where I discover this improv group, and I join it kind of on a lark, and then it just becomes my life, and and it was the first time I got positive attention, and not to ruin the end of the book, but I ended up speaking at my graduation, and got a laugh from an interruption. So the stage was set early. There was this like pivotal point in the speech, and all of a sudden, it's a quiet moment, and you just hear a baby just kind of go, like real loud. And so just perfectly seriously, I just turn toward where the baby was sitting, and I just go, thank you. And then I go back into my speech, and it gets a laugh, and and that was, I guess an early baby heckler. I don't know. It was just kind of a precursor to what was coming.
Right. So this next question is kind of a logistics thing, because you do shows all over. You actually did a show. I'm near South Bend, Indiana, and you did a show at a bar that a friend of mine owns, Vegetable Buddies, and that was, I think it was towards the end of the year last year. And the funny thing is I had talked him into booking a couple showcase shows and stuff like that myself. So I was doing shows right after you did your show, and I want to talk to you about that particular type of bar, because it's a rock bar. The seats, the table, the stage is like 5 foot, 4.5 feet. The tables are far away, and it's like the absolute worst place to do comedy. So when you think about doing comedy in a place like that, and let's take out the fact that you fill the place up and everything's cool because of that. How do you change the way you act on stage when you're in a venue that's got the high ceilings, the tables are further away, and the lighting's different and all that? How do you change the way you act on stage?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't even put that venue in the bottom 50% of bad venues for stand-up. But first of all, you do everything you can to change it to make it work for you. I have lights that I bring. I have, you move tables around. Having produced as many shows as I've done, you get a feel for a while. After a while, you get a feel for like, okay, move this here, move that there. And when I'm on the road, my openers and I show up 2 hours before a show, and 9 times out of 10, we show up 2 hours before a show, we talk to them about logistics, and we go have dinner. Every now and then, we are moving tables and chairs around until door.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you get there and you're like, oh, you guys don't know what comedy is.
Right.
This is not music. This is not a distraction. You need to focus.
Yeah.
But part of that is also, it seems counterintuitive, but that kind of stuff happens quieter and you lean back. And the reason is because you need people to lean into you. You will never be able to shout down people who want to shout you down.
Right.
But if you get the crowd who wants to be there to lean in, then the other people become the exception.
Right.
So that is the, and also, and and my guys know this, but when you open strong. There is no meandering into your set. You have to prove that you are funny within 30 seconds, or you will be eaten alive.
Right.
And so, and that's true at colleges most of the time. I mean, unless you're doing like a theater. But The idea is prove that you're funny and then play around.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny. I think I did my last show there in January, and I think I did, I don't know, 8 or 9 shows. And I finally figured out, for me, because I obviously wasn't pulling in the same size audience as you do. I mean, I think my best was 70. So, which is pretty good, but the problem I had was just being so far away from people on the stage, and I just wasn't getting the feedback. So the last show I did, I had one of my comics is confined to a wheelchair, and I said, hey, let's just do it on the floor. Let's do it on the dance floor. And I put the lighting, I had Jeff change the lighting so there's just one spotlight on whoever the comic was, and that show ended up going so well. I was like, oh, okay, now I know what to do. But it took me 9 shows to figure it out. I was moving tables like you and trying to figure everything out, and it turned out just stand on the floor and you're okay.
Well, every now and then, you learn something new. Like, I used to run a club in New York that only sat 50 people, and we had it as like a long rectangle where you're at one end of the rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day we just decided to try, the manager had a suggestion where we decided to try just from the middle of the rectangle, and it was so much better. And I never realized until before then that it doesn't matter that you kind of got to play in the round a little bit more that way, but there's more of a front row, and the more people in the front row, the more chance you have for what I call a crowd leader.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have one table that's losing their mind laughing, the closer they are to the front row, the more other tables they're going to. Because laughter is communal.
Yeah.
And the more chances you can give yourself for a crowd leader, the better the show's going to be.
Mm.
And I didn't know that for years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thinking about the fact that you are so entrenched in social media, and you obviously you weren't always. I mean, you have to start somewhere. If you were to give somebody a newer comic advice on how they should approach social media in order to get their name out there, what would be the advice you would give?
Well, I actually kind of was always entrenched in social media, taking different forms. But I was on MySpace in its first year. I was on Facebook in its first year.
Mm-hmm.
I've been using social media most of my career. But my advice for someone is we strive to be original on stage. If someone called you a hack for your act, it would be the biggest insult. So why are people so willing to be hacks when it comes to promotion? Why is it that the only promotion they'll do is something they already saw someone else?
Yeah.
Go be original. Go figure something else new out. Go say, okay, well, this is something that somebody did. That gives me an idea for something else. Change it this way. What if I swap it that way? Hey, here's a new website that's popping. Maybe I'll do more stuff there, et cetera, et cetera. Be original.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only way things are going to work is if you do something new.
Mm-hmm. And
there's that old quote, there's nothing new under the sun. And there's another quote, make it new.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously the stuff that you have, between the Q&As, the heckler comebacks and stuff like that, nobody else has it. And now really nobody else can do it unless they find a different approach, because you're already the king.
Well, yes and no. Andrew Schultz has had a huge success with heckler clips. Drew Lynch has had a huge success with them. Josh Wolf is doing heckler clips with his YouTube and Facebook is popping. And, and that's wonderful. Like the thing that my friends used to say about me in college was Steve has 100 ideas every day, and it's our job to tell him which 99 of them are horrible. Find the one. And that's what you need to do. I have thrown so much pasta at the wall to see what sticks. I'll tell you probably the dumbest thing I did was early on in my career when I was I would go eat at these random places around the country, and I would always see headshots up from people that no one's ever heard of. From someone who was like on a soap opera for 2 episodes of one. And I started thinking, how the hell does that headshot get up there? It's not like that person is eating in that diner and the server goes, "Oh my God, weren't you in one commercial for a couch?" Like, clearly the person had to volunteer to get that headshot. And I started thinking, well, why can't I do that? So I sent a bunch of headshots around. I figured I would try with Bloomington, Indiana, because I was a regular at Bear's Place, that club there. And I found 25 different restaurants that were in that neighborhood. And I sent them a headshot with a letter saying, "Hey, I ate there last time I was in town. I loved it so much. Just wanted to send this as a token of my thanks. I'd love to see you at a show sometime." And you know what? One Chinese food place put it up for like a month, and that was it. It was such a dumb idea. But the point is, it was an idea.
Yeah.
And if it worked, it would have been a great idea.
Yeah.
So you have as many ideas as you can, and maybe one of them will work.
Yeah. Are you pretty impetuous about stuff if you don't have those people to tell you what idea is good and what idea isn't? Would you just go after all of them?
Well, that's why I have close friends in my life.
Yeah.
And look, every now and then I misfire something fierce.
Yeah.
But also the more you do, the better you get at it, the better your ideas get. And sometimes you create some and it doesn't work. I posted like 5 different podcasts and none of them really hit, and so I moved on. But you keep trying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. What is the best and worst advice you got when you were coming up being a comedian?
The worst advice I got. The worst advice I got is someone told me to stay clean because there's more work for clean comics. And the reason that's bad advice is that even though it is technically true, there's even more work for good comics. So if you're a good, clean comic, go be clean. And if you're not a clean comic, then don't be clean. Be the best comic you can be, whatever that is.
Right.
The best advice I got was from Jimmy Brogan. I was about 5 years in and, working pretty regularly, but I've seen all these comics can't even get MC work, get television spots. And I'm losing my damn mind. And I reach out to Jimmy because he is not only like, a mentor to me at that point, but also he used to book the Tonight Show, so he knows what TV bookers are looking for. He was one. And I asked him about it, and he said, "Are you making enough money that you're comfortable? Can you eat? Do you have a roof over your head?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you having fun?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Then shut up and have fun." And it's the best advice I got, and it was, it was less than a year before I got my first TV spot after that. Because I shut up and I had fun, and I was a different comic on stage.
That's great. I'm so glad you mentioned Jimmy Brogan. In order to be different and original, I did a live stream podcast where I was getting comedy coaching, and basically I did I showed like a 7-minute set that I did, and I don't know if you ever heard of Joel Byers, but Joel and I went through the set. And the funny thing is during that, Jimmy Brogan was watching it, and Joel said that he didn't like one of my jokes. And Jimmy said, "That's the best joke of the set." So it's great to get different points of view, but it's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And I pegged him to get on the podcast after that, and he says, "Yeah, I don't like podcasts, no dice." So So what three things do you know now that you wish you would have known when you started doing stand-up?
The most important thing is understanding how important ego is. We're all just trying to matter. And, ego comes into play when it comes, when you run afoul of other comics, when you're dealing with bookers, when you're dealing with casting directors or development VPs or whoever. Ego is an important thing to keep in mind, and not just your own, but theirs as well. Another thing is for everyone that doesn't like you, there is someone across the street that doesn't like them. There are 10,000 people powerful enough to get you on TV. There is no one who's powerful enough to prevent you. Because someone else will disagree with them. What else would I like to have known then that I know now? Your mental health is the most important thing in this business. I take less money for gigs that I can bring my own openers to. To have someone on this journey with you, and every now and then, look, I would say it was 50-50, where I would open, I would have someone open for me who I didn't know, and I would really like them and stay in touch and become friends. And then sometimes I would have someone who would be a miserable week where I'm like, I am embarrassed to be on the same stage as this person.
Yeah.
And, I made the decision that I would rather lose money. I'd rather pay for the flight or whatever I could do to prevent that from happening again. Because, my mental health is too important to me.
If you were to give, say somebody decides right now they want to be a comic, what advice would you give, given that we're in a pandemic and the world is the way it is? What advice would you give somebody that wants to be a new comic?
It has never been easier to start, because when you start, you're an open micer. And all you need to do to be an open micer right now is get 10 people together on a Zoom and go back and forth and work on jokes. The point of an open mic is not to do 5 contiguous minutes. The point of an open mic is to work on jokes. Yeah. And you can do that now in a way you never could before. Yep.
Writing workshops has been the best thing I've done during this pandemic. It's been absolutely, completely beneficial to me.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's, I know you've probably got another one of these guys scheduled here, so let's wrap up. Where can people find you on social media, website, and all that?
I'm a big believer in people use the social media that they prefer the most. So I'm on pretty much all of them. At Steve Hofstetter. So, find me there. Come see a Nowhere show. I think come see it, really pay and see it. You can watch from anywhere in the world. I watched one while I was walking my dog. And, check me out at Nowhere Comedy. And, stay tuned for more.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's been really great talking to you, and I'm glad we got this worked out. I'm glad I was on social media at the time I was on.
Yeah, that's another bit of advice. Make sure you catch the opportunities when they're there.
Yeah, no doubt. Pay attention. That's a big thing. Okay, Steve. Well, it's been great talking to you, and I wish you the best. I've really admired, first of all, how you handled your video about wearing a mask is just fantastic. I've shared that a couple times, and the way you've handled the strife in this country, I really admired it, because I I noticed the ones who didn't speak up now, and those are the ones I worry about a little bit, because they're too worried about their fan base to actually talk about what's important. And I think it's important that we talk about stuff now.
Well, I think their fan base are a bunch of assholes, and I wouldn't be worried what a bunch of assholes think about me.
Yep. No doubt. No doubt. Well, thank you, Steve. This has been a great talk, and I wish you the best.
You too. Bye.